My name is Stefani C. O'Connor. I am editor-in-chief of Hotel Management Magazine. This year at InfoComm 2019, Hotel Management, with the assistance of AVIXA, is pioneering a hotel track to bring to you and the attendees here at InfoComm what is going on the hotel side. You know, over the years, the hotel industry, which is a trillion-dollar industry, has been a little lagging in terms of embracing and adapting to technology. Well, over the past decade, that has really changed. So our thought, along with AVIXA, was to pioneer these hotel tracks so there could be greater insight into what the needs are of the hotel industry and how we can all work together and bring the two communities together. So I thank you for joining one of the 6 inaugural hotel tracks here at InfoComm. So thanks. A little bit of housekeeping. If you could just make sure that your phones are on silent. We are video and audio taping, so this will be available at a later date. I would like to introduce our panel, and today we are going to be talking about interactive virtual meetings. So with any further ado, Mike.
Good morning, everybody. Boy, it's so good to see all of you coming in that you have interest on this topic. This is a really big issue in the hospitality industry in general. Now, I know Stefani mentioned hotels in particular, but when you look across the spectrum of hospitality, we're seeing that not just the hotels, but the restaurants, the airlines, the cruise lines, virtually everybody in our business in hospitality, travel, and tourism is looking at this issue of interactivity on the meeting side and on the event side. So, as you heard, my name is Mike Hampton. I have a doctorate in human resources development, and I'm assigned at Florida International University in responsibility for the development of all of our interactive learning activities that go. And since I'm sourced from the Chaplin School of Hospitality and Tourism Management, my focus has always been on the hotel and restaurant side in particular. So I'm looking forward to sharing with you some of the ideas and things that are going on there. And there's some stories that I want to particularly bring out as we're going through, because for those of you that have been to Miami, who's been to Miami before? Raise your hands. Let me see. Pretty much everybody in the room. Miami is one of the most dynamic hubs for hospitality, travel, and tourism that exists in the country, in the United States. So we're very fortunate to have headquarters of many of the hospitality companies that are based there, and to be able to interface with them as we're developing all of the technologies and resources to allow us to do more and more things with this interactivity is a very exciting thing. So I'm looking forward to sharing some of that insight with you.
Thanks, Mike. Joe?
Great. Joe Schwinger. I'm the CEO and co-founder of MeetingPlay. We consider ourselves to be on the higher end of event technology for large conferences. So we primarily work with corporate 500 companies to bring interactivity to their events at a very high-end scale. Personally, the company was founded after being with Marriott for 10 years, and the topic is very current and timely because it was during those 10 years at Marriott that I saw the need for interactivity to merge what happens on property with what happens in technology before you get there. So I'll talk from that perspective on how we were able to bridge the gap between the two.
Sure. Hi, my name is Chris Vollmer. I'm the Marketing and Communications Director for Shackman Associates New York. We are a destination management company, and what that basically means is that when you go to a destination for a meeting, our company makes it amazing. We create personalized, unique experiences for attendees anywhere between 100 to 30 to 40,000 people like we have today. What we see in audiovisual, particularly when you do in hotels, and in New York we have no shortage of hotels right now. We have over 125,000 hotel rooms in New York City with about another 50,000 on the way. So really with audiovisual, it's really up to your imagination. The key is to be able to figure out exactly what your attendees want, how to deliver it, and make sure that it goes smoothly without creating headaches for meeting planners and for the attendees themselves. There are a variety of different ways that this can be delivered. One obviously is sort of the over-the-top wow that could be anything from video walls to video mapping, which is basically incorporates 3D technology. This is especially valuable at events. The other way to do it is do personalized delivery, where, for example, if you're on the trade show floor here, you can get personalized audiovisual content delivered to your mobile phone while you're interacting with people, or you're basically, or you're interacting people and going on your websites or going on your phone and searching for other things. That becomes a customized delivery component. And finally, from the kind of the wow standpoint, you can go over the top with things like a flotilla cruise, for example, down the Hudson River, where we've done a 10-boat flotilla with LED branded components that goes to the Statue of Liberty, and they have a 45-minute fireworks display. So I'm looking forward to discussing this with everybody, and feel free to ask me any questions about some of the ideas that you want to think about for your meeting and how to incorporate virtual into that as well.
Super, thanks, Chris. One of the things about the hospitality industry is the fact that it is built as a people industry. Everybody connects, you come in, you sleep, you take advantage of what's available in the hotel. I'm wondering, what's the general take on doing digital meetings as opposed to face-to-face meetings? It's been going on for a long time now. It's not anything that's new, but the way it's presented is new. It's much more expansive. It's much more, for want of a better word, interactive. So I'm wondering, Mike, from your perspective, veteran hotel guy, what do you see?
Well, we see so many things that are changing. I'm going to put up some slides, if that's okay, to help facilitate. Sorry, some of the thinking. The world is changing so fast in every level that hotels are right at the forefront because everybody stays in hotels, whether it's for business or for leisure or has an interface with us at some point in their lifetime. So all of the changes that are taking place with the advent of new technologies is changing the way that we have to think about our business. So one of the big things is that when we think of events, we typically think of meetings. And meetings in particular are important, but it's all of the interactivity that occurs with our guests. Have any of you read the book by Joseph Pine that's The Experience Economy? If you haven't read it, you definitely should pick that up. It's been around for a little while, and he's had several editions, but it's about the new thinking of the economy and how we engage our customers and the kinds of things that are going to impact our success in business moving forward. So business models are changing, and the biggest thing that I think that is changing is the consumer themselves. Because as generations age and move on out of the marketplace, the newer emergent generations, not just the millennials that everybody's talking about today, but the emergent generations that are to come after them, are going to be much more in tune to the kinds of environmental changes that are taking place. Technology being at the core of those things. But what we hear is that guests, whether they're on travel for business or pleasure, are really looking at what is the experience. And I think many of us can see that because of the shift to the boutique-style hotels and the lifestyle hotels. I was with Alvaro Valeriani, the Senior Vice President for Marketing for SBE, which is part of the Accor Group. And they've really started to rethink the entire structure of the way that they do business so that that interactivity, whether it's for meetings or anything else, is at the highest level possible. So the world is kind of on fire with these kinds of things. It is for meetings and events, and the interactivity runs the spectrum from all kinds of things. And one of the examples that Alvaro gave me when we were having our conversation is that there was a young woman who was having her engagement party. And she had friends and family all over the world, so they did a virtual engagement party so that everybody could participate in the event, even though they couldn't physically be at the location where she was. So it's changing that mindset about all of these things. So I think that the lifestyle hotels are going to be a stimulator for this, and certainly big companies like Marriott and Hilton and the other players are coming up with great ideas. But it's all about how do we want our brand to be perceived as we move forward, not just today, but as we move forward, and how are we going to embrace these kinds of things as we move into this next phase of who we are and what we are. So Stephanie, I have to tell you, my staff thinks I should join this self-help group on and on, because I keep going on and on. So I'll stop with that.
Well, not to beat a dead horse
All
on
good
this
info.
experience, but I would also say that this is a key identifier that we should be thinking about. We did a joint study with BizBash, and looking at the millennial group, 80% of millennials would say that they would rather have an experience at an event than something tangible to take away with them. And if you look at the way that we are moving, I mean, even my friends over here at Marriott, they're kind of leading this cause. You don't just walk into a hotel room anymore. They want to make it about an experience when you get there. So you're seeing that it's now connected to Netflix and all the other things that are expected when there's an overall experience. And that's actually, how MeetingPlay was born 7 years ago. We were looking at the landscape and with Marriott as Meetings Imagined, and everything was the same. You walked into a meeting room and there was your buffet and there were your plates. So the idea was, how do you levitate that and be a clear, distinguishing leader in the industry? And it was all around experiences, and that is what has really played to us. And then the last thing that I would say about this is that as MeetingPlay, the requests that are coming to us now compared to 7 years ago when we started is all about the things that, and we'll talk about the positives of virtual meetings, but all of the things that our meeting planners are now focused on, and that is the networking aspects of why people are coming together. I have people here from MeetingPlay that are not really coming to be in the showroom. It's the experience of being at the bar at night, talking to somebody, and that connection that you make and bringing that back. And those are the things that really I see our meeting planners are now more focused on than they ever have been, because that's clearly different than where it was a couple years ago.
Yeah, and I'll definitely agree with that. I mean, one of the things that we see is that the lead time in meetings has grown, it has become much, much closer to the meeting date. So, back in the day, you would have a lead time on a meeting that could be anywhere between 6 months to 2 years, and now we're getting requests that are coming in that they want to do a meeting at a hotel in New York 30 days in advance. That doesn't mean everyone's going to make it. So what you have to do is incorporate a virtual component into the meeting that's going to be as real life as possible. That's going to create that experience that people are going to have on the touch and feel side in an audiovisual basis. And going back to the whole idea of experiences, that's all our attendees want. They want experiences. When they come to New York, they want to live like a local New Yorker. They want to experience what it's like to live in New York City, even if it's for like 3 days. That's one of the key things. And anything that we can do to complement that from an audiovisual standpoint, we're going to do, whether it's something in advance, whether it's like a virtual reality, sort of like what are the kinds of things you want to see in New York, to things where we can incorporate audiovisual into scavenger hunts in Central Park, for example, to something, like I said, where you have events that kind of go over the top with branding, whether you're taking over, like, for example, you're taking over like a ship, or you're taking over a hotel with different kinds of branding that people are going to be able to get kind of fired up about at their meeting. That's really one of the key components that we're seeing as far as incorporating that kind of technology into the meetings. And then again, like, for example, at a trade show, being able, as you probably all know, you're not going to be able to meet every single person that you want to meet at the show. It happens. But being able to deliver content and be able to engage people can at least start that conversation. Even if it's an in-person meeting, you're going to be able to deliver the content, so when the show is over, you're going to be able to stay in touch with people, you're going to be able to get to know them. And this also, by the way, works ahead of the show, where you get to know people, you get to figure out where they are. You're going to be able to deliver some kind of content that, hey, they're at the Starbucks down around the corner, we're going to geofence that, you're going to go and have a cup of coffee with them. These are all components that are helping meetings become more engaging, as we say, more experiential. And at the end of the day, it's all about building the company brand or the association brand or whatever it might be.
So are these programs, are they better suited for larger hotels? I mean, some of this stuff sounds like it
Across the
might be a
board.
little bit pricey. And I know that there are smaller companies that actually want to be advanced in terms of their tech. They
Sure.
don't want to be left behind. They see what the big guys are doing, and they say, gee, I want to do that, but my margins are so tight, I can't afford to do this. How do you balance that between, say, providing AV and digital meetings to a larger company, and then doing something similar for smaller companies who want to be on board tech-wise?
As far as hotels? Yeah. So, I mean, I think really in New York, I think that most of the new hotels that have opened have plenty of capability. I don't think that's really an issue. It really comes down to the vibe that you're providing and how big your audience is. So, for example, we serve basically 3 different types of meetings. We do corporate incentives, which are basically a trip for our top performers and a lot of it's like in the finance and insurance industry. We deal with just regular corporate meetings and conventions that are something similar to this, and then we do with association conventions, which are huge. And it really depends on the audience, but to give you a great example, Stefani, you can basically create branded experiences with AV at like 5 or 6 different hotels where you're going to house people. Very similar to what we're doing here. We've got 5 to 6 hotels. You can create an individual experience at each hotel, and it can vary. And that's really where, from a meeting perspective, from a meeting planner perspective, you want to get to know what your attendees want in advance. Because when you're able to do that, then you say, okay, well, instead of booking them at the Hyatt Regency, where there's going to be one type of AV experience, we're going to book them at the Hilton Orlando, which has maybe a different kind of experience or a different type of event that incorporates that. In the boutique hotels, the technology is there. So that's not really an issue. The question is really implementation and really like figuring out what your attendees are looking for. What's the takeaway?
I just wanted to, since we mentioned Marriott earlier, Marriott had been at the forefront of putting together new hotel lobby designs to facilitate small group meetings. And there isn't a lot of infrastructure other than the design and the FF&E that goes into the lobby redesign that's necessary to be able to help support interactive meetings. Starbucks has been doing that very simply in many of their stores. Small groups get together, they have their business meeting, and then they move on. But the technologies are scalable, so it depends on to what extent the operation wants to move in this direction. But the simple thing is making sure you've got the right bandwidth so that they can access whatever technologies they're using, particularly organizations using Slack today. It seems like so many people are moving to that platform. So as long as they can get Slack and they can continue to interact among themselves with their colleagues who may be dispersed in other locations, now that's just a very simple and easy fix relatively.
2 comments on that. So something you said that I would say is very important for anybody in this room that is responsible for helping planning these things is we are no longer able to sell things just as here's what you get, a bag of crackers. We've moved into kind of this era where there's a customized sell, and you really need to be looking at the needs of the end user, the meeting planner, or the attendees to custom kind of provide solutions. So you said, how do you provide solutions when nobody has, when you're in a small environment where they simply just don't have budget? Well, there's still ways to do that, and kind of I would say the technology is helping on that. The second thing that I want to comment, you mentioned bandwidth. So we were talking about smaller venues. I would actually tell you on these larger conferences, bandwidth is going to be more important as we move into the next era than it ever has been. And the reason being is because it's not in your control anymore in some respects. So you probably heard Amazon bought a company called Twitch. They are a streaming technology for video games. And evidently there's hundreds of millions of people that are into this. Well, that acquisition and what has happened since then has kind of been on the forefront of what's going on in the meeting space. People are literally streaming all of the sessions that are going on, and you're streaming it too. So you no longer are the content streamer. You could have hundreds of people streaming the content at the same time. And that fundamentally needs to change the way that you think about the way that you're planning and the AV requirements for a lot of your meetings. Because the last thing you need is, bad reviews online. I've seen Twitter, crush major meetings because of all of these things that were left off the consideration bucket.
To continue on the bandwidth issue, 5G just rolled out in the Miami metropolitan area, And this is a huge discussion because we are modeling some holographic applications already in locations throughout the area. And that's been critical for us to be able to do that well. So as we have virtual guest service agents that can facilitate check-in or check-out at hotels, or if you're at Miami Airport at the international terminal, they have a virtual agent there that you can interact with. And so now that we have this new capacity for data movement, it enables us to be able to move into new things that we can do. Now you can have facilitation of events in your properties as a result of this new access. So it's a fascinating opportunity.
You mentioned 5G. Also, if you check out the latest issue of Hotel Management, our cover is about the tech wonderland. So it is being embraced by the industry, and I think it'll be a good read for you. One of the things when we're talking about things like 5G and really cutting edge type of technology, how is that being presented by, say, the AV community into the hotel industry so that it's understandable and approachable? Is there a way that, you know, sometimes it's a little fearsome for people who may not know and they want to try it, but they just don't know how. Is there a way to mesh what's going on in the AV community with the hotel industry so that everybody's on board with the latest? Joe, I see you shaking your head.
Well, I don't know if this is going to be well received in the room. So what I would say, what I've noticed, you know, and it's really, I would say, within the last 10 years that this whole notion of virtual meetings cannibalizing the event space at hotels has really come to play. And even, you know, major players like Marriott have tried to capture that in their hotels by actually building virtual facilities. What I would say, actually, is there was a little bit of, you know, butting heads, I would say, in the AV industry in terms of what this momentum that was going on. And just like, you know, I would say Uber and the taxi industry said, no way, it's never going to happen. Well, I haven't stepped into a taxi, well, except in New York City and sometimes, but I haven't stepped into a taxi in literally 4 years. But they were there to ignore it. So my advice for everybody, because 5G is a game changer. It is literally a game changer. I'll probably talk a little bit about what Facebook is going to do in this area with virtual reality, and it is going to hit us very hard. I don't have an answer, but what I would say is that we need to be much more open to partner with these technologies when they come out than run in the opposite direction, or else we're going to be the taxi industry trying to sue because they took all of our market share.
Yeah, and I would just say I don't think that hotel meetings are going away anytime soon, but they're being adapted. And I'm sure our friends at Marriott can attest to this with the boutique brands that have been opening in New York City. And from our perspective, we get more demand for those types of hotels through Marriott than we do for the Marquis, unless it's a huge meeting. So, you know, as far as 5G, I think that, listen, I don't think any of us really completely understand what it is, but I think, in my view, there is a willingness to learn. And I think that's the key. I think the key is that people, it's like, if you're willing to learn about it and it can be explained from the AV industry, it can be explained in terms that people can understand, I think people want to learn about it. And they will want to deal with this and incorporate that into their hotel brands and then create sort of a hybrid experience with both in-person and virtual at the same time, which we see as really being the future. I don't think it's really one or the other. It's not a black or white issue anymore.
And there is a reverse to that, actually. So 5G could be a revenue eater for the hotels.
Yep.
So once we get to the promised land of what 5G has to offer, you know, the Wi-Fi offering and the exhibit space with the Wi-Fi and the hard lines, you know, how long until that's, you know, no longer there? So you will see a shift in the mentality of these big companies thinking about how they monetize that 5G or other means of bandwidth.
Yeah, a key part of this discussion has to be the facilitation, that hotels are not there just to provide guest rooms, but to provide this experience. And I'll give you an example of a project that we've been involved with in Eastern Europe. We support and facilitate a coming together of entrepreneurs that do pitches on new ideas and technologies and other things. And we had presenters that were coming in from Israel, from Rome, from the United States, and Japan. And so we had to have the infrastructure in a hotel where we were going to base to be able to support the integration of those pitches that were coming in from other parts of the world. And this issue of globalization, it's not coming, it is here. And so companies have global operations, and they expect that whoever they're going to partner with, whatever brand they're talking to in the hotel side, that you're going to be able to help provide that facilitation. And so having the bandwidth now gives us greater access to be able to do these kinds of things. But as we move forward with those generations, not just the current buyer, but those that are to come, we have to be prepared, because their expectation is they're going to have these virtual meetings and access to them, and that you're going to provide the infrastructure for it.
Well, I would take one step further on that too, is that it's not just saying, okay, you're going to have a virtual meeting. It's that if you're at a convention or a trade show, or you're dealing with something at a hotel, not everyone can answer every question, or not everybody in a company can attend everything. But what we're going to see, I think, from a virtual side, is there's a question out there that basically there's going to be a virtual capability to literally plug somebody in on the spot. It could be a hologram, it could be something that's on video, it could be on their phones, and they're going to be able to answer those questions. So if you're at a hotel that is really looking at today and tomorrow's attendee, being able to answer people's questions and be able to give them up to the minute information in a video format is going to be incredibly valuable.
Is the U.S. up to speed in terms of what you were talking about? You went to Europe and you had all these folks coming in. Is their technology advanced of ours in this country? And how do you mesh those two if we're doing like global virtual meetings? What's the perception there?
That's a great question. I think, I don't know if it's really a technology question as much as it is a usage question. I think when you go outside the United States, the technology is used more than it is. I mean, I'm talking about like mostly, well, even in like developing countries, but I mean, in developed countries, the virtual technology and especially technology that can be used, that can be directed right into your phone while you're on site, whether you're geofenced or not, is way more advanced than it is in the United States. I think that people are sort of catching up to it. And again, I think there's a learning curve. And I think people want to know about it. I don't think it's like one of the, like you brought up the taxi industry. I don't think that we're in a situation where people are going to be like, I'm never going to like care about this technology, and I don't want to learn about it. I think I think people want to learn about it. And by the way, I don't necessarily think it's just millennials or it's the next generation beyond that. I think people of all ages are willing to learn about it, and because the technology is easier to adapt now, and especially if you're putting it in a personalized basis, people are very open-minded about it. So I think from a hotel standpoint, your guests want to learn. Your guests are willing to work with the technology if you can explain it to them in terms that are going to make them get value out of it from staying there, basically.
The only thing I'll add to that, actually, those are very valid points. I would agree that the usage is going to be much higher internationally. The only thing that I would say about that is that we do find that the technology curve in terms of how they're consuming that, the devices that they're consuming that, is much lower resource, much lower level than what we find in the United States. So we're United States of an iPhone, basically, right? And we all have to have the latest. Well, if you go over to Europe and you go to some, say India, you're dealing with, very low level technology. So you do need to adapt again to your audience. If you're going to be a global company, you need to be thinking about that. But if you're going to deploy domestically, you can kind of raise the bar a little bit higher because consumers have devices that can really handle some of that technology.
I think there's global competition. So I don't think the U.S. is behind or advanced. I think we probably are moving as aggressively as we can against the other markets that are out there. The Chinese in particular are very advanced in the kinds of things that they're doing. In fact, their mobile devices, if anybody's seen their app WeChat, I mean, that's like Facebook on steroids or WhatsApp on steroids. It's unbelievable They can put groups together, and they can be anywhere, and they can have group conversation about a topic or interact on other things. So they're doing some pretty fascinating things. In fact, they even have Alipay integrated in with WeChat, so they don't even use their currency anymore. They're just buying things online wherever they go for whatever purpose. So the Chinese are doing some interesting things, but I ran into a guy from Azerbaijan just recently who has an app that was developed there for being able to identify people with common interests. So you walk into a hotel lobby and you want to know who's staying in the hotel, who are all in the AV business. The device will tell you. So now if you want to link up with the other people there to have conversation, you can set up a let's meet up in the lobby and everybody can get together. So, whether it's Azerbaijan or China or here in the United States, I think everybody's thinking about what's next and how do we get ahead and how do we do things differently. And so it's going to continue at even a greater pace than what it has been so far.
I think that the technology, though, is also probably the biggest threat to the meeting industry as well. All of these things that you've just discussed, and even the things that I do for these large meetings, are potentially in 5 years what is going to be a threat to us in terms of getting people in an area to network with each other. I think, probably the other buzzword that I would throw out there that we're seeing is artificial intelligence, right? So the rise of AI in looking at all this content and bringing it to your fingertips and not have to go and walk, 5 miles a day in a trade show is also very appealing to people, right? So this networking algorithm, the artificial intelligence, I think, again, I'm sure we'll talk about in a minute, virtual reality is all going to be something that is going to be a threat to the hotel industry as a whole. If I could virtually put on, my glasses and be in this room just as we are right now, but it's identifying people that I should talk to, why spend the $3,000 to go? So we're not there yet, but those are the types of things that we need to be thinking about so that we're not caught behind.
Just from a humanistic perspective, do you think that's a good or a bad thing?
Well, personally, or do I, would you ask me, so I tell this story quite a bit, right? When I was younger, I would put a CD or a tape in my car and I would listen to music. I walk in now my house and my 11-year-old is telling Alexa to play her favorite song. I mean, would I have ever thought that we'd be talking to a box called Alexa to tell it to do all of our things for us? No. But when I show, my kids a CD or, we just recently had a joke because we were in London and they had a telephone and she's like, what is that? So I don't think personally, again, I have the right to answer that question. It's the generation that is coming into this industry, the next generation of workers that have to go to these meetings, that it will be the norms for them. Paying over WeChat, they do that 100 times a day, and they think nothing about it.
Yeah, and I would just add one thing on this, though, that I don't believe that face-to-face meetings are going away, and we've seen a lot of data that backs that up. However, as I said earlier, there are different requirements to them now. They're being scheduled on much tighter timelines. You're dealing with meeting planners who want the world on a very tight budget. And this is where I think technology can really enhance that, because instead of having to organize multiple physical events that are going to cost lots and lots of money, you can create technology experiences with maybe 1 or 2 events versus 5. They're going to deliver the kind of experience they want. That's where I think that's really going to be the next big thing in destination corporate meetings and destination business travel, is that we're going to see the technology that's going to basically make the enhancement on a budget that the meeting planners are asking for. That in my view, that's really where, in fact, it's not even the next thing. We're seeing it right now.
So this morning I was having a conversation with a 24-year-old who is attending the event here, And he asked about what I was going to be talking on today. And I shared with him it was on virtual meetings. And he said, you know, that stuff is all fine, but I really want to be able to look somebody in the eye and be there with them when I'm having a conversation. And so I think virtual, we can talk about it, but there are certain individuals and certain engagement activities where you have to be together. And so I don't think it'll go completely away. It's just changing. And that gets back to what we said before is, you know, what business are we in? What are the experiences that we intend to provide? So we know that we're not in the business of providing beds for people to sleep in, right? We're in the business of providing a good night's rest so people can be more effective at their business transactions or to have more fun while they're on vacation. So we have to think critically about what business we're in and how does this help us in delivering what that business is and doing it better than the competition.
What do you feel might be missing right now that you would like to see emerge from the AV community that would help towards virtual meetings? Is there something that comes to mind, or you might say, gee, if I only saw this happening, I'd do more virtual meetings, or I would go the opposite direction? Is there something that's lacking?
We're in the human business. So for hotels, restaurants, anybody in hospitality, travel, and tourism, it's about the human connection. And so technology tends to be single or double dimension. And so we've got to get that to a different level where it feels human. And that we haven't gotten to that point yet. I was just on my iPhone yesterday because my daughter was showing me that you can now have the iPhone read text to you, and I didn't realize that it could do that. So, but it has all these different voices that could be who's reading the text to you. And so I listened to a whole bunch of them that were automatically defaulted onto the iPhone, and they all sound like robots. And so we've got to get away from that. And so the technology, audio-visual, has to be able to advance to a level where it is, people feel more comfortable with it. And then that will give us an opportunity to help facilitate more of those kinds of things, I think.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely, it's the human touch. But again, and keep in mind, this is coming from a guy that's threatened by virtual meetings. But again, this is the direction in which these technologies are trying to go to. So I've talked a lot about virtual reality and streaming technologies that are now, being used out there. And I would say, to be quite honest with you, Facebook is probably the biggest threat that I see for my company moving forward. They have a very robust streaming platform that, is now streaming arrest, and people are watching it constantly. They own the largest virtual reality hardware and software that there is, and there are billions and billions of people that are using this technology. So we've seen them creep into the meeting space a little bit. It's the combination of those three things that I think gets us closer to what we were just talking about. If I'm looking at a screen and there's 5 people that are talking and I don't know where to go, that is not the human touch that we're talking about. But if I bring me virtually to a place where everybody is there, that's getting me a little bit closer, and that's where I think that, I start to see that becoming a little bit more of a threat.
Without giving away any trade secrets, how are you hedging against that threat then at MeetingPlay? I mean, what are you doing now that's going to benefit you in the future, so that you're still in business, other folks are still in business, but the advanced technology is also in play? What are you doing now for 5 years from now?
Well, not to talk about specifics, but I'll give you some examples, right? So my world is dictated by what Apple does, right? So Apple decides that they're going to come out with this new technology called iBeacon 5 years ago, and it's really just a rebranded Bluetooth. All of us really know that. But they decided that they were going to bless it, and that becomes a huge industry norm now that we use iBeacon technology for this proximity stuff he was talking about in the lobby. Our goal is really to not try to create headwinds against what's going on, but to again, partner with the big providers and layer on top of them. I think that the true win for us is going to be if we can complement those technologies and lay on top of them and find holes of what our customers are looking for that they can't provide. That's going to be kind of a short-term, I would say a long-term win. The short-term win for us, though, is, again, going back to the experience, right? Where we thrive is, there's hundreds of mobile app companies that are out there, but they can't do X and Y where we can, because we're focused on giving the meeting planners exactly what they're looking for. So short term, we're going to continue our strategy of layering on top of the goals of what the meeting planners are to add to the overall experience of the event. And again, networking being probably the biggest thing. And by the way, that's also, I would say, where we're seeing big opportunities for hotels. So, we work with Marriott a lot. We actually have iBeacon technology in some of their largest hotels that are giving the hotels data metrics on where people are going, what rooms they're staying in. It also, we tap into that for the networking algorithm to, when they're in a meeting room, to show that Joel is sitting right over there and he works for MeetingPlay and I should talk to him. So that's, again, the merger of all of these technologies coming together that you're not going to get on a virtual screen.
Well, I'll have one other thing too. I know in what we deal with in New York is we have a lot of technology companies that want to release new versions of their product to business travelers. They're the people that are most likely to buy the technology. They can try it. You know the deal. I mean, you go out on the floor here and you can try all these new gizmos and all this other stuff. People love that stuff. So from a hotel standpoint, if you're able to create special product demos at events or at a hotel, people are going to love that. And the technology companies are going to love that too, and they're going to be more willing to work with you.
I just wanted to share a story because it came to mind as these guys were just talking. I was on a Royal Caribbean ship, and they were hosting a reception for an incentive group that was going on this cruise. And they have, if you know, they've been deploying robotic bartenders onto their ships. So they had a robotic bartender for this reception, and everybody was fascinated. They were coming over to watch the robot make their drink. But Royal Caribbean was really smart in that they had backup bartenders there who had been retrained as entertainers. So the bartenders were there and interacted with the guests, and they were even talking to the robot as if the robot were a real person, and made it a whole phenomenal experience for the people that were there. But they played on the whole idea that, okay, we have this technology, but we've got to move it into a new dimension. And how do we bring that human element together? And then how do we keep manifesting it? So as we end up with holograms and we have all these other elements, virtual realities that are coming about, we have to think differently about our businesses and how we constantly adapt. Because everybody here knows that what's true today is not going to be true tomorrow. So we have to be very nimble in all of this thinking, right? And be ready, because Apple could change their mind tomorrow, and we've got a whole new scenario of what we're up against, right?
That's a great point, because, as you know, I remember going on a cruise ship myself, about a year ago, and, the most fun thing about talking to the bartenders was talking to the bartenders. Right. That was the cool part. I would go up there every afternoon at 5 o'clock. I got to know the bartender. I didn't really care about him making the drink. I cared about him talking, and we talked about our lives and kids and whatever. I mean, that's sort of the human touch that I don't think is going to go away anytime soon. But for hotels and for the hospitality industry, to focus more on what humans do well is going to be the big selling point. And if you're going to have robots that are making drinks or robots that are going to be carrying your bags up, that's great. That's a task. That's not something that is going to put hotels or the meeting industry out of business. What's going to keep the meeting industry in business is going to be that human touch, is talking, getting to know people, being in the business of experiences and customer service. Those kinds of things are never going to go away in my view. But I think hotels need to focus on that more than, again, just providing a bed or doing a task.
Well, and building off of that, if hotels are supporting virtual meetings, the AV component of that is huge. So how do you make sure you've got the right team members in place to help bring all that together and make sure it flows and works, and that everything is staged and works like it should, I mean, that's a huge consideration. You can't just buy the technology, put it in place, and hope for the best. There's a lot that has to be done to ensure that it all fits together.
And that, again, is what my suggestion is when you ask me if I see it as a threat, right? I feel like all of us need to be looking at this as actually opportunities.
Yep.
You know, there was one thing that I remember a former boss of mine said to me that at the time I didn't like, but now it really rings true, is, hey, if you're not changing, you're not moving forward. And you know, that really instilled in me that every, 6 months, 12 months, you need to be looking at how you can change your processes around what's going on to be better at what you're doing. So I think you just highlighted, really the bulk of what we're talking about here is we need to be embracing for our customers how we can bring the right technology to meet their goals. Virtual is going to be a part of it, but we all win when you make it part of your revenue stream and services that you're offering.
We are at the end. Thank you so much for your engagement this morning. I want to thank our panelists, Chris, Joe, and Mike. I think they did a spectacular job. Why don't we give them a round of applause?
Thank you.